Okay, at the beginning, I would just like to quickly introduce myself because I'm really not an important role today, but just for you to understand why I have the honor to moderate this event. I'm a clinical and health psychologist, and I did a PhD within the EU-funded PhD network Horizon 2020, Children Born of War, Past, Present, Future, with my lovely colleague Amra. And I think this is actually the most important thing why I'm here today. I discussed conflict-related sexual violence in actual crisis regions like Syria and Lebanon, also in post-World War Germany, and I focused on mother-child relationships, on children being born of rape and their relationships within family dynamics. And also back in 2018, I co-organized with Amra in Sarajevo a conference having the title A Transgenerational Perspective on Conflict-Related Violence Facing the Past, Transforming the Future. And I think this is why we are all here today, because speaking of children born of war, they are up until now still a neglected, vulnerable population, having almost no rights, no matter where you look around the globe. And I think we still have to transform the future for this population. So who are those CBOWs? We mainly speak about CBOWs when we talk about those being fathered by foreign soldiers and local mothers, no matter what kind of conflict or post-conflict society. And also the subgroup of those being fathered by UN peacekeepers. But we will hear many more things about it in the next hour. So I hope that most of you had the opportunity to watch the movie Ahead, In the Name of the Father, produced by Darrel Toulon, which will speak to us shortly and is luckily sitting next to me. But first of all, we are very grateful that Bettina Vollath, member of the European Parliament, is hosting us, organized and initialized this event, and I would hand over now to her and give her the stage to introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Sophie, dear active and dear listening guests. Thank you very much for showing interest in our today's online event, Children Born of War, from a hidden group to bridge builders in post-conflict societies. I'm very pleased that you are taking the time to give space to this very important topic. And let me start by calling a spade, because that is what I hope that happens also during the next 2 hours. So let me start again and saying that I'm very happy that you are taking the time to give young adults who are born out of rape during the war a space to make their voices heard. I'm very happy that Ajna Jusić, you have already received the video message from her in advance of this event, is with us today. And I had the opportunity to meet Ajna personally a few weeks ago and had a long conversation with her, and I was really very moved by her stories. On the one hand, they made it clear that children born out of rape during war are a group very strongly affected by stigmatization and discrimination, a hidden group as introduced by the name of our event. On the other hand, these young people with their difficult personal...
atë fatin e tyre të vështirë, personal.
What?
Çka po ndodh këtu? Dëgjohet edhe një zë?
Now all voices are better together?
Si duket po dëgjohen të gjithë zërat?
What's the problem now? I am on original. I go on. On the other hand, these young people with their difficult personal fates can not only be understood as victims, but also as bridge builders. Their courageous emergence from anonymity, from hiding, offers a great opportunity for all societies in the Western Balkans to come to terms with the wounds of the war and the conflicts that led to it and continue to weigh heavily on the Western Balkans. Coming to terms with these personal destinies offers the potential to pave the way to finally succeed in recognizing these young people as full citizens without any stigmatization and discrimination, and no longer excluding them with the image in their minds that they are children of the enemy. However, much still needs to be done to achieve this. They must have equal opportunities for support and education, and they need public support for the psychological care that is needed in almost every single case. At the end of this path must be the realization these children born of war deserve exactly the same rights and recognition as any other child. They must no longer be reduced to an unwelcome product of war, but must be recognized as full members of society. The fact that their biological parents come from different, extremely conflict-ridden parties must no longer play a role on this, but should, on the contrary, lead to the recognition of what they have in common and thus bring them together. Even if the past still hurts deeply, in the interest of today's and tomorrow's generations, we must look forward. The light at the end of the tunnel, which can already be seen with optimism, is called reconciliation. I very much hope that this event today can contribute a little to bring the issues associated with children born of war to the attention of a broader public, especially in regions where there is a quarter of a century after the war, still hardly any support and transparency today. I hope social tolerance and demystification can be achieved as a first step soon. A really impressive example of coming to terms with the feelings and painful experiences of the children born in war is the docu dance theater In the Name of the Father by Darrel Toulon, which also gave rise to today's event. Thanks, Darrel. I hope you had the opportunity to watch the film documentation in advance via the link sent to you, or perhaps you will catch up on it later under the impression of today's discussion. And I'm very pleased to have Darrel here with us today. I'm honored to welcome such a distinguished panel of experts, researchers, and politicians, so many that our moderator Sophie Roupetz will present them to you afterwards. But three guests I would like to greet now. Firstly, I'm very grateful that Ajna Jusić is with us today and will share her burdens and her demands on her own behalf, but also on behalf of people sharing the same fate. Secondly, I would like to take this opportunity to warmly welcome Valentin Inzko. I'm very pleased that you join our event. And thirdly, I express my sincere thanks to Her Royal Highness, the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg. As she is unfortunately prevented from attending in person today, she has thankfully sent us a video message for the conclusion of the event. Finally, I would like to say that it's certainly also an essential aspect of today's event that our speakers come from different countries of the Western Balkans. I think it's valuable and important that we will hear perspectives from Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, and Kosovo. We also have speakers from Austria and Luxembourg. So I'm looking forward now to all the contributions in the first part and the discussion in the second part, and therefore now give the floor to our moderator, Sophie Roupetz, who will thankfully guide us through the event with her great expertise on this topic. Dear Sophie, you have the floor now back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bettina. I think these were very informative and touching and welcoming opening words. And as you already said and announced, what makes this panel so interesting is that we have people from diverse backgrounds here and from all from diverse countries. And speaking about this, I will hand over to Amra Delić, who is a neuropsychiatrist and psychotherapist with a specialization in trauma psychology. And what makes her so valuable in this field is that she also established the association Forgotten Children Born of War in Bosnia and Herzegovina, being a citizen from Bosnia. And she also did her research within this PhD network, Children Born of War, in the last years in Leipzig in Germany. So she speaks as a researcher, as an activist, and I would be happy to hear your words now, Amra, and if you could share with us a bit about your recent work, your research, and your activism in the field.
Thank you for the introduction, Sophie, and thank you for the invitation. Before I start, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to Member of the European Parliament, Ms. Bettina Vollath, for making this event possible. Then Her Royal Highness, the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg, for her Stand, Speak, Rise Up initiative, her warm hospitality and her support during the Global Survivors Network retreat that was held in Luxembourg 2 years ago, and to Honorable Valentin Inzko, the former High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, for using his power to impose an amendment to Bosnia and Herzegovina Criminal Code to ban the denial of genocide and the glorification of war criminals. As you heard, my name is Amra Delić. I'm a psychiatrist, activist, researcher, and I professionally grew up throughout the war and after. Actually through my involvement in humanitarian and trauma work as a coordinator of many international psychosocial training and research projects, as well as over 20 years of my clinical work experience. As you all know, during the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, an estimated 20 to 50,000 girls, women, and men were being exposed to systematic sexual persecution, rape, enslavement, unwanted pregnancy, forced motherhood, and other forms of sexual violence. Although rapes occurred on all sides, the majority of victims were Bosniak women, while the majority of perpetrators were Serbs. It had been understood early on that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as in the wars in the former Yugoslavia and elsewhere, children born of war had been born. What had not been understood and is still not appreciated fully is that the group of children born of war in Bosnia and Herzegovina is far more diverse than merely comprising children born of rape perpetrated by enemy soldiers. Inappropriate behavior, sexual abuse, exploitation and trafficking of women and female minors by peacekeeping and international humanitarian aid mission personnel operating in war-torn Bosnia and Herzegovina similarly led to children fathered and frequently abandoned without the father taking responsibility after the end of their deployment. These children, alongside the children conceived of the enemy, remained in the shadow of the war, socially invisible and not heard of. It is known from the literature that some women victims were murdered, some found refuge in neighboring or third countries, whereas a certain number of war rape victims were internally displaced from one Bosnian entity to the other. In the war rape context, many victims were kept by soldiers in military barracks, schools, and abandoned houses for the purpose of raping and impregnating. However, a little is known about the plights and fates of young and pretty Bosnian girls and women who, after being multiply, individually, and gang raped in detention, were pressed into a marriage in order to survive across the enemy lines, which itself led to a compulsory motherhood and even more severe suffering on many levels. Some of the latter escaped to the free territory after the conflict and reported that while in captivity, they had to change also the names as part of their true ethnic identity before giving birth to their babies, aiming at hiding a war rape involvement of their husbands from medical personnel and other officials. In the Bosnian patriarchal tradition, a deeply rooted gender stereotypes and the culture of honor and shame attached to sexual violence still prevail. The families of survivors thus may feel dishonored and stigmatized, so that fearing from rejection and ostracism, many survivors decided not to disclose their experiences of such brutal crimes and not to seek for professional help. Even many years later, the issue of conflict-related sexual violence and survivors have been ignored by government agencies, which de facto remain divided across the ethnic lines. It took almost 15 years after victimization to adopt the law, not at a state but entity level, so that survivors could apply for a legal acknowledgement of the status of war victims. The lack of political will to ensure a uniform protection for all survivors in post-conflict Bosnian society added to their structural silencing, underreporting the crimes, and the lack of an official registry of the victims more than 20 years after the war. Through my trauma work and activism, I met survivors of war rape, of which many disclosed their horrible experiences 15, 18, 20 years after the victimizing event. At the same time, witnessing survivors' societal and academic silence about wartime rape in Bosnia, even 20 years after, I decided to conduct a master study in the whole countries among 3 ethnic groups to examine the quality of life and long-term psychological effects of wartime rape in Bosnia. And study sample consisted of 105 survivors and 88 controls, non-exposed to sexual violence in war. The results showed that the majority of survivors were raped at the beginning of the war, that they were held in concentration camps, raped by unknown and multiple perpetrators. With regard to psychological consequences, 80.5% survivors reported on the presence of PTSD symptoms 20 years after. 72.4% survivors on a high intensity symptoms of phobic anxiety, and 50.5% of survivors reported on depression. Our results also indicate that the wartime rape is associated with a low level of satisfaction with quality of life. Also, 13.3% of survivors reported that the rape resulted in pregnancy, of which 9.5% pregnancies were terminated in our sample. Naturally, a high prevalence of forced pregnancies that was found in this study led to my further research focus on children born of war. Conflict-related sexual violence is not a strictly individual experience. It has systematic repercussions on families, communities, society, and society as a whole, and may result in intergenerational trauma transmission to children born of war. Official statistics concerning children born of war in Bosnia and Herzegovina are still lacking. Their needs and vulnerabilities have been neglected, and their rights, as formulated in the Convention of the Rights of Child just a few years prior to the war in Bosnia, continued to be denied. In 2015, I was invited to Hanover to present the results of wartime Bosnian study at the International Conference on Children Born of War. Only then I learned definitions and the issue of why the category children born of war, and I met German occupation children from the Second World War, who then were elderly persons. Soon after, I joined the EU Maria Curie Innovative Training Network, Children Born of War, Past, Present, and Future, and a PhD research, mainly as a PhD researcher, mainly based at the University Clinic Leipzig and University Medicine Greifswald. Between 2016 and 2017, a quantitative study was conducted on children born of war in Bosnia with the aim of gaining more detailed knowledge on developmental conditions in childhood, mental health outcomes, stigmatization, and identity issues among children born of war. This study was actually replication of German study on occupation children. Prior to this study, the process of social construction of the CBOW, children born of war, actually as a special category, was in its initial stage in Bosnia at that time, and covering only children born out of war rape perpetrated by enemy soldiers. Thus, our study comprised actually of 33 adolescents, young adults, who were less likely to be born if there was no war in Bosnia, ages 17 to 25, of both sexes, of different ethical and racial affiliation, conceived in rape, forced and/or consensual relationship, and divided into 3 groups: 11 children who were born out of rape by enemy soldiers, 11 children fathered by peacekeeping soldiers, peacekeeping personnel, and 11 children fathered by international humanitarian aid workers. The results of this study showed a high prevalence of traumatic experiences and mental disorders, as well as a complex and long-term impact on socio-economic and familial deprivation, emphasizing the importance of considering the children born of war as a particularly vulnerable group in post-war situation. In this sample, 12.1% of children born of war screened positive for post-traumatic stress symptoms, 21.3% reported on high level of depression, and 42.5% of children born of war reported on moderate or severe level of somatic symptoms. They also reported on anxiety and behavioral problems. In addition, the severity of the mother's traumatization and the availability of supportive network impacted the quality of mother-child interaction and communication. Because we don't have enough time to speak more about detailed results of this study, I will skip this part. And in reference to their stigmatizing experiences, participants in this study reported that being stigmatized had a negative impact also on their satisfaction with quality of life, and they tried to avoid the situation where they might encounter prejudice. Among the most stigmatizing experiences identified by our study participants, it's being called names like Chetnik, Bastard, Dalinka, being excluded and or having the feeling that they do not belong, not knowing or missing the father's name in documentation, personal documents, which in Bosnian administration is obligatory. Both studies, that done in post-war Germany and that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, found the devastating effects of conflict-related sexual violence on survivors' mental and physical health, as well as their overall living conditions and well-being. However, the majority of survivors still face barriers to accessing appropriate care. Intergenerational aspects of conflict-related sexual violence have yet to be adequately addressed and can inform the development and distribution of interventions tailored to the needs of the mothers and their children. Additional measures should be taken actually to at the community level to complement mother-child support, and those measures particularly should be addressed to reduction of stigma and discrimination and also economic hardship. Until recently, children born of war in Bosnia and Herzegovina remained hidden within the overall conspiracy of silence around the topic, and inspired by the research and the urge to protect female conflict-related sexual violence survivors and children born of war in conflict and post-conflict context, the Forgotten Children of War Association was founded in Bosnia and Herzegovina in November 2015, and its representatives came out taking part at an international conference of the Children Born of War Research Network held in Sarajevo in 2018, the one that Sophie mentioned in her introduction, when we met Darrel Toulon, which then led to his artistic production In the Name of the Father. To better understand the situation of children born of war, the affected community needs to accept the ownership of the issue to be able to create the social and emotional environment that provides for their stable and fulfilling experience. Through our clinical and research work with survivors and supporting survivors' activism in dealing with the past, we have realized how important it is to rehumanize these persons, not only through numbers and statistics that psychiatrists usually do with their epidemiological studies, but by highlighting.
Amra, I would interrupt you.
And in just the last sentence, but the highlighting,
okay, go for it.
Their realities, their stories, their self-representations, and amplifying their voices using transdisciplinary, collaborative, and interactive approach as it is shown in the Darrel Toulon art play. Thank you.
Thank you, Amra. As usual, very fruitful insights into your research. However, I'm a bit sad because I would have prepared nice questions for you, but we will have more time to come back to it later within the question and answer 15 minutes. But you nicely introduced already our most important player today, Darrel Toulon. The founding artistic director of the Alpha Group, where he has been developing interdisciplinary experimental artistic work since 2006. And he is the producer and the mastermind of the movie you hopefully all watched, In the Name of the Father, in Bosnian, U ime oca, which is an artistic project in the meaning to give the hidden population of CBOW a voice. So, Darrel, I would give you the word now. It's your stage.
Okay. Dear Member of Parliament, Bettina Vollath, distinguished guests, panelists, activists, interested citizens from the international community of thinkers, carers, and doers. I am thankful for this opportunity to speak to you today, and I do so as an artist. Art is about those who have the courage to use bits of reality to get us to see reality in light of a new reality. It's about vision by means of imagination. It's about empathy in terms of looking through this world and seeing the possibilities of a new world, a better world, a more decent, a more compassionate world. As a self-confessed and practicing artistic citizen, I believe that artistry involves civic, social, humanistic, emancipatory responsibilities and obligations to engage in art making that advances the social good. So who should be making art and about what? Whose stories get to be told? What kind of content is relevant or suitable for art? And then what? Who is it being made for? Do they know? And do they care? In 2014, a group of young adults at the Kosovo National Ballet shared with me their early childhood experiences of the horrors and atrocities of the Kosovo War. And driven by their stories, I synthesized out of these elements a different kind of dance piece, as if it were a war-themed documentary film. It was possible to explore many war-related themes with them. But when I asked about the children resulting from wartime rape, my queries were met with blood-drained faces and stony silence. Nobody was able to enter this territory with me. There was simply silence. There are two different kinds of silences concerning these children. Strategic silences, which protect them and their mothers, and imposed silences, through which societies ignore or avoid the problem. This silence is better described as a deafening roar of callous contempt that constructs them and their mothers as objects of shame and humiliation, that facilitates their social exclusion. I want to reflect on the word privilege, and in particular, that privilege which has been granted to me as an artist. The privilege which grants me access to the highest of cultural, educational, and political institutions. Artistic achievements rely on certain privileges, and entitlement to these privileges involves, if not precisely duties or obligations, at least attendant responsibilities for artists to change themselves and the world for the better. So how can a production like Ujme Oca, In the Name of the Father, be put to work toward positively transforming people's lives? You helped me to enter the society, one participant said to me afterwards. When I came into the room to meet the actors on the first day, it was the first time I felt I belonged to a group of other normal people, because until then, I felt invisible. When asked whether telling her story and whether viewing the scene which it inspired had changed her relationship with a mother who rejected her at birth, another replied, "It helped me to understand her more, to see what she went through." It is at the end of the performance, when the actors and the audience embrace, that we find ourselves in a place where we want to talk, even as we struggle to find the right words, where, transported by the magic of performance and the triumph of humanity, we become more knowledgeable about questions we would like to ask. The highest form of knowledge is empathy, writes Plato, for it requires us to suspend our egos and live in another's world. How can we make the children born of war not feel invisible? Give them a sense of belonging? How can we get others to listen to their stories so they may be understood? How can we help them to understand themselves? How can we make a difference? Art has the power to make meaningful social differences because the values of arts are invariably grounded in social experience. When separated from or elevated above everyday life, art becomes isolated from the human condition under which it was brought into being, and from the human consequence it engenders in actual life experience. So what do you think is an artist? An imbecile who has only eyes if he is a painter, or ears if he is a musician, or a liar in every chamber of his heart if he is a poet, or even if he is a boxer, just his muscles? Pablo Picasso answers for us all. Far from it, at the same time, he is also a political being, constantly aware of the heartbreaking, passionate, or delightful things that happen in the world, shaping himself completely in their image. Creating a human rights culture that will achieve justice for children born of war requires some key changes, one of which is a transformation of the social discourse surrounding children born of war. Such a change is integral to any other effort to effect social reconstruction and reconciliation. Academics do it with their publications, which are read by learned and advanced thinkers. Politicians can do it with their policies and with their people. The man in the street, however, and the woman in the shop, your neighbor, my bus driver, may not perchance come by the official statutes and charters, and they do not subscribe to the best specialist journals. Change is only possible through visionary, broader thinking and intersectoral action in the multiple languages of all who need to not only tolerate, but who need to learn about, to understand and empathize with, and to experience life with the children born of war. All hands have to get on deck, each person taking responsibility of educating, illuminating, and enlightening in their fields. I thank you very much for giving me your time.
Thank you, Darrel. Very impressive and strong artistic words. I would like to ask you how it came that you started this movie In the Name of the Father, but I'm afraid we're running out of time and we will talk about it when we went through all the panel discussions. So Ajna, you are the one affected, so somehow the most important person here in this panel, and I'm so grateful and happy that you are here with us today. And I had the pleasure to meet you in person in Sarajevo back at the conference. You are not only a CBOW, you are also the president of the Association Forgotten Children of War. So I'll give you the word now, and we will all be happy to hear more about your life and your position as a president of the organization.
Thank you. I'm so nervous, but okay. Greetings, everyone. My name is Ajna Jusić, and I'm child born out of wartime rape. And today I'm speaking on behalf of all children born of war all around the world. First and foremost, I wish to express my gratitude to European Parliament and its representative Bettina Vollath for their hospitality and their support throughout the organization of this important event. Today's event represents a unified voice of support and struggle of everyone present for the legal and social recognition of the children born out of rape. Thank you for being here today with us. We are often deemed a hidden population, as the circumstances in which we were born often lead to stigmatization and discrimination. We are still exposed to the whip of social judgment and political disregard. Precisely because of this, our mothers try as hard as they can to hide the identities of our fathers, which makes mapping and unifying children born of wartime rape in particular country more difficult. As a population, we are neglected and by birth carry life-threatening risks and permanent damage. This can include infanticide, statelessness, stigmatization, discrimination, physical violence, emotional abuse, little to none access to education, malnutrition, poor health, poverty, homelessness, becoming a part of armed or criminal activities, and increased risk of radicalization. I felt many of these risks, but I still don't understand why. I haven't raped anyone, neither did my mother, but he did, and he still walks free. This state keeps him safe. You all keep him safe by staying silent about our existence. This transgenerational effect of sexual violence mixed with conflict must be urgently recognized and dealt with. In general, lack of specific national and international policies and laws which should deal with our needs, risk, and damages will probably multiply and increase throughout the lifespan of the children. A lost childhood becomes an insecure adulthood, and the claim to human rights becomes an illusion. Our mothers are exposed to duplified stigmatization, as are the surviving victims and mothers. Without support, women suffer several physical, psychological, social, and economical effects of the forced motherhood. The damage and lacking with which our mothers come across is transferred to us, their children, who are branded as children born out of wartime rape. I'm not the first nor last who will speak about this struggle for the rightful and dignified life of the children like me. I'm proud of myself for being able to gather the strength together with my mother and my stepfather to bear naked in front of all of you, because choosing this struggle, it wasn't easy for us. I'm proud because Association Forgotten Children of War, together with its member, got rid of the label of invisibility. We went through the pages of national and international laws to write the first proposal for legal recognition of the children, and we succeed. This proposition is now on the desk of those who carry decisions in Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During my engagement as an activist, I have not talked about the man who dedicated his life to good deeds. I'm not talking about the man who saved the lives. Today, I'm talking of a man who destroyed smiles and families with his hands. I'm talking about rapist, murderer, a war crime, criminal, and therefore I'm asking you now, who among you is ready to give me protection every time I speak and show my face to the world? Have you ever thought how frightening it really is to spend your days talking about war criminal who is still walking free? Do you know how many times I thought I actually saw him? Do you know how many times I have thought, what if something happens to me because I am talking about rapist, about murderer, and a man who is ready to commit a crime, and I'm sure these people are ready to repeat their actions. I have spent nights awake thinking, what if something happened to my mother, because I know she suffers during our struggle for legal and social recognition. Do you know how many times I have stood up in front of the camera while at the same time knowing my mother won't sleep that night because it hurts. It's not easy to listen to everything that I said in the media and everywhere. Mother, you are here today with us, and I'm sorry if you don't sleep well tonight. We are fighting. You taught me that, and thank you. Thank you a lot. And you all, please do not forget, I didn't rape anyone, neither did my mother, but he did, and he is free today. The state keeps him safe. You all keep him safe by staying silent about our existence. The global and national communities must face the taboos and complexities surrounding the reproductive violence, bringing to forced motherhood, conception and birth as a consequences of violence. The existence of the children born of wartime sexual violence, consequences of pregnancy and motherhood, likely ending in the birth following rape, must not remain euphemisms in the resolution of the United Nations and other international political actors. The constant normative and practical marginalization of children born of sexual wartime rape and their forced mothers in post-conflict societies are signifying obstacle to sustainable and inclusive peace, reconciliation, and transitional justice. The processes of transitional justice which do not recognize nor enforce the rights of the children born of sexual violence cannot fulfill their goals, which include the true reconciliation, responsibility, and reparation delivery. The denial of the rights of the children born of wartime sexual violence is irreconcilable with the demand of the human rights of universality. Let today's event be raising awareness to the global gap in protection children born of wartime sexual violence, and let inspire further action within states, international institutions, and civil societies. The creators of policies must take care of children born of sexual wartime violence. The Association Forgotten Children of War is ready to transfer their experience anywhere in the world. We are ready because we don't want to take a part in the future wars. We do not want to take a part in the future rapes. We do not want to take a part in the policies that allowed us to go through this kind of suffering and pain. Let's be a society of equal values and not a society of different labels. Let us build the bridges of peace, solidarity, empathy, support, but before everything, let's build bridges of humanity, because that is the only way we can endure and be a healthier society, and in that way we can create a better society for the future generations. Thank you all.
Very strong words. Thank you, Ajna, for sharing. I'm sure we all have multiple questions, but I give you a rest now. And we speak to Mariana Senyak now, which I warmly welcome here on this panel. She is a psychotherapist and a manager of the Women's Room Center for Victims of Sexual Violence in Croatia. Hello, and I also read that within the project Peace Women across the globe, she was nominated for Nobel's Peace Prize among 1,000 women from all around the world. Hello, Marijana, and I would give the panel to you now. Please introduce yourself further.
I greet you all on behalf of all clients of Women's Room Center for Victims of Sexual Violence. all members of Women's Room, and on my behalf, I am a psychologist and psychotherapist with long experience in providing direct support to the survivors of sexual violence in Bosnia and Herzegovina and later on in Croatia. I would like to thank you to the organizers, to Mrs. Bettina Vollath and Sophie Roupetz and all organizers, Darrel Toulon, who make contact and connection, and my colleague Vesna Telserlich, through whom I get involved on this panel. I would like to start from the point of 15 years ago, when we started the campaign for dignity of survivors, aimed on recognition of legal status for survivors of war rape in Bosnia and Herzegovina 15 years ago. One of the war rape survivors said, "If I must reveal that my child was born from war rape, I will not pass my requirement for recognition of legal status." This opinion was made upon strong stigma which existed and still exists in the societies in the region, and similarly in other war-torn countries all around the world. Her words also reflect her need to protect her child from further marginalization and discrimination in the society, which was not sensitive for the needs and equal rights for children born from war rapes. In amending the law on social protection in BH Federation in 2006, we tried to include children born of war rape within the title, all children of war rape survivors, to have rights on education and scholarships. Among others, it became ordering in the law, but its realization was never in place. Croatian law on rights of victims of sexual violence in the war, adopted in 2015, recognizes special vulnerabilities such as forced pregnancy resulting from sexual violence, forced miscarriage resulting from sexual violence, birth for child as a consequence of forced pregnancy resulting from sexual violence, sexual violence against a minor as single conditions to achieve the right to an increased monetary compensation for victims of sexual violence in the war. Still, in legislation and national policies in Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, there is a lack of a recognition of child born from forced pregnancy resulting from sexual violence in the war as victim of sexual violence in the war itself, EA as category of victim of sexual violence in the war who could achieve the right. It draws attention to the need for adhering national legislation and policies with UN Security Council Resolution 2467, adopted on April 23, 2019, which for the first time explicitly recognized that women and girls who became pregnant as a result of sexual violence in armed conflict, including those who became mothers, may have different and specific needs, and connected, distinct, sometimes life-threatening and enduring risks and harms often faced by those women, girls, and their children born as a result of sexual violence and conflict, including economic, social marginalization, physical and psychological injuries, discrimination and lack of access to reparations, and urging states to recognize the equal rights of all individuals affected by sexual violence in armed conflict, including women, girls, and children born of sexual violence in armed conflict, in national legislation, consistent with their obligations under the international conventions. The International Day of Tolerance is the right occasion to remind that UNESCO Declaration of Principles on Tolerance states that tolerance is not only a moral duty, it is also a political and legal requirement. All war children to whom Ajna Jusić and Alen Muhić courageously gave their voice in public became actors of their and societal change in the region and worldwide by art as strengthening tool through the docu-dance theater of Darrel Toulon. Theme of war children is coming from a silence and margin to the hearts of people and to the political instances. By opening the dialogue in different communities, we all can solidarily help in combating stigma and strengthen children of war to achieve their equal rights as victims of sexual violence in the war. This is also the way to contribute to the replacement of the culture of war by the culture of peace. Thank you all for your attention.
I'm sorry, I'm still muted, not anymore. Thank you, Marijana. Very strong words as well. Due to our time limitation, I move on to Feride Rushiti, the director of the Kosovo Center of the Rehabilitation of Torture Survivors in Kosovo. Is she here with us? Yeah, here you are. And she was also among the first doctors to recognize the need for treatment of psychological trauma for refugees fleeing violence. And I'm happy, we all are happy to listen to you. The stage is yours.
Hello, everyone. Dear Mrs. Bettina Vollath, dear Darrel Toulon, my dear Ajna Jusić, dear Her Royal Highness Grand Duchess of Luxembourg, representatives from the region, activists from Kosovo, dear Vasile Krasniqi, who is with us as a survivors. It is my great opportunity to be invited by the member of European Parliament, Ms. Bettina Vollath, on the International Day of Tolerance to speak about one of the most stigmatized and repressed consequences of the wars, the most painful legacy of all the children born of war rape. This is no doubt on one of the most complex aspects of dealing with the past, not only in my country, but anywhere where there is a war continuing. I am very glad to be here with a representative from Bosnia and Croatia, with whom we share a similar legacy of wars in 19th and similar social context. In particular issue, Kosovo can learn from development made in Bosnia or in Croatia already. The Kosovo society has taken a long time to acknowledge the full legacy of 98 and 99 war. In some ways, it is a story that is still unfolding more than 2 decades after the war. Crimes of wartime sexual violence were a taboo subject for many years, and the advocacy work has been long, slowly, as well as very difficult. When I founded the Kosovo Rehabilitation Center for Torture Victims in 1999, there were no service for survivors of wartime rape and no public acknowledgement of this crime or the consequence the survivors left with. In a country that had come out of devastating war, just speaking about wartime rape and inviting survivors to come and receive psychosocial care or medical service at our organizations was a serious struggle. In those early days during our community work, we were even faced with a physical threat in that time. That's how strong the taboo around this crime was. It took us many, many years of sustained efforts and determination to fight the stigma that was unfairly attached to the survivors of wartime sexual violence. Despite the evident progress made in those 2 decades, the fight against stigma is an ongoing battle, and we are still working on that. To overcome those barriers and constraints, we had to mobilize different layers of community, starting from human rights activists, from religious leaders, community leaders, artists, international representatives, as well as Kosovo institutions, in order to provide a rehabilitation service to the survivors but also to empower them to speak out because they were silent and they were invisible in our society. Those collective efforts have allowed us to create a space for the inclusion of the survivors' voice in the public discourse, in the institutional agenda and narratives of the war. Still, it took us 15 years after lobbying and advocacy to achieve legal recognition for the survivors of wartime sexual violence. Finally, in 2014, we reached to include survivor sexual violence in the law, which provides social benefits to other war categories. And it took us another 4 years to push and support the state to implement such a laws. The good news is that by now, over 1,000 survivors are receiving state pension as a result of their inclusion in the law. But the bad news is that estimated around 20,000 survivors of sexual violence of war still remain unsilenced, unrecognized, unsupported, as some of them are not present with us. They pass away, unfortunately. With every step forward that we make, we face another wall, another deep taboo. First, it was for the women and girls to make them recognize, to create a platform to be heard. Then years later, we began work with a male survivor. It was another stigma, another ways to challenge the stigma surround males and boys who face these consequences. And now we are before what is perhaps the deepest, darkest secret of the crime of wartime sexual violence. Children conceived through the tools of hate and destruction. In Kosovo, nobody speaks about it, unfortunately. Not the mother, because they are too afraid of restriction of their children, their family, and community. Not the family of the survivors or community, because we have not prepared the ground or facing this difficult truth of the war. So far, not even civil society, because of care to not harm this process, the survivors and children belonging to this age group who might be a product of war rape, considering how sensitive and fragile. So still we didn't open as an issue, as a topic which is really very fragile and sensitive and needs special care to be treated. And it is a great opportunity for us to hear what's happening in Bosnia right now, what's happening in Croatia, and just to learn from each other. And most certainly not the state institution have opened this kind of taboo, because historically they were followed from NGOs. Each of the initiative which started from a state, it was led and pushed from a civil society organization who worked with the survivors. Because of this, so far in Kosovo there is no data about children born of the war rape. In the recent year, in partnership with a local and regional organization, we are working together in the project called Amplifying the Voice of the Survivors, with idea to document the crime of wartime sexual violence, a project which reveals the consequence as well as event themselves, but generally speaking, to this day, children born of war rape in Kosovo remain unknown, unspoken, unheard, unaccepted, and untreated. So this is a status quo we are going through. We have only begun to address transgeneration trauma in the recent years, that even then very carefully, because some of deepest wounds are still hidden. When I mention transgeneration, I'm speaking on the children who were affected from a mother who were raped, not from a children who are as a product of rape. Children born of war exist. They are now adults and our citizens in our new state. They are our children friends, our students, our colleagues. Perhaps they are also our patients in our organization we treat, the customers we serve, the voters whose approval we seek. But yet their existence is not publicly acknowledged. They are not legally recognized by any laws or policies. There are no social or institutional mechanisms in place to provide any sort of assistance to this very fragile group of people affected by the war on such a deep and personal level. So I'm encouraged by this initiative to bring us together, not only to discuss the status quo, but hopefully to create a platform in which we build collective action and real momentum for the acceptance and support of the children born of war on every level in our society. These children deserve to be recognized, be heard, accepted, and supported in the family, society, and institution. Today, I am using the occasion of this International Day of Tolerance to invite all of you to join us in this arduous but vital journey in facing this painful truth and giving the voice to the voiceless and treat them with dignity.
Thank you, Feride, so much. I'll cut you a bit short here if you don't mind.
I would like to thank you, Ajna, for closing her speech with building peace through peace through bridging of humanity, which I think is a very strong message for all of us as activists to work together in order really to bring peace and change the social construction towards those children. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Feride. I'm also very sorry. I don't want to cut anyone short, but we just received the message that our dearest ambassador, Valentin Inzko, needs to leave soon. And I think we are almost excited to hear what he will say to us today. So he's the former High Representative for Bosnia and Herzegovina, an Austrian diplomat. And he imposed changes to the law banning the denial genocide in Bosnia-Herzegovina unexpectedly shortly before he left. And I think I will give you the stage now, and we would be happy to hear more about the law and maybe your feelings, how you feel now with the recent tensions in the region, how you feel this law might have contributed or not, and if you feel it came too early or too late. We all are aware a bit about the discussions in the media, so the stage is all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to speak to you today, but I'm quite embarrassed because after the speeches which we heard from Ajna and others, Feride and so on, it's difficult to speak, you know, and also because there are quite a few deficiencies in the international community. We could have done much more. As far as the law is concerned, of course, this law also covers on one side genocide denial, absolutely, as we have it in Austria. We have Holocaust denial. And you wouldn't believe it, recently a lady was punished in my province in the south of Austria because of a cake. But on the cake, there were two letters, you know, SS. So this is forbidden in Austria. You can't glorify Hitler or SS divisions, etc. And the other issue was they were glorifying war criminals, their morals everywhere. And I thought that this was escalating. And this is why I changed the penal law in order to prohibit this glorification. Of course, glorifying war criminals, this means also glorifying those who have raped during the war. And we have heard it from several speakers. They're walking on the street and they're just free, you know, and in some instances, they're even being glorified. And because there was an escalation of glorification, there was an escalation of morals, I thought I would impose this law. Of course, there was a pattern to it. First, I asked President Dodik to remove on a student hostel the Karadzic memorial plaque. Later, I asked the Parliament of Republika Srpska to rescind or annihilate 3 decorations which they gave to Krajisnik and Karadzic and Plavšić. They didn't do it. Actually, they said it was correct to give these war criminals these decorations, you know. But I'm speaking about final convicted war criminals. Yeah, of course, much more, you know. I also wrote a letter to Mr. Borrell to impose restrictive measures which are possible on the basis of EU. There are 2 laws in European Union. Actually, one is of 2008. It's about genocide denial and glorification and trivialization of war criminals. And the other one is violating of Dayton. Yeah? But I didn't receive a reply from him since 17th of May. Only yesterday, this discussion took place in the Foreign Affairs Council in European Union about restrictive measures and sanctions. But of course, typically EU, no decision was taken yesterday about imposing such sanctions. Yeah. When I prepared my speech, of course, I will not read it, it's much too long, but it was my most difficult speech. It is heartbreaking, you know, to go into all these details. Like almost 2 million people, 2 million women were raped in Germany. Sophie has studied this subject, you know, about 100,000 have died. 240,000 have died based on these rapes in Germany. Alone in Berlin, 10,000, you know. It's really terrible. And even communist Milovan Djilas from Yugoslavia, he complained to Stalin about the rapes which were committed by the Russian army. At the same time, on the other side of the world, you know, in Korea, we had these so-called comfort women, which are at the disposal of the American soldiers in South Korea. But we had also Imperial Japanese army had also comfort women for their soldiers, you know. So in Japan and in Korea, which is really terrible, and call it with this euphemism, you know, comfort women. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, we have already heard it. We had hotels, we had prisons which were full of women who were raped, you know, and these figures are horrific. Due to time constraint, I will just use a few words, key words for this subject, you know. Maybe one of the most frequently used words is stigmatization. Then we have against such children, we have violence, we have abandonment, infanticide, we have abuse, marginalization. Believe me, in some countries, you can't even get a personal identification card, you know, a document that you exist just because you are a child of a raped woman. These children have especially emotional problems. They have no sense of belonging because sometimes even the family would exclude such children, but of course also the society. They don't have security. We heard it also before. People are insecure and nobody's protecting them. And of course, what is very serious also, these traumas last for decades, even after the war. When the war is over, these traumas still continue. Yeah, there's also job disadvantages, as we know, and regretfully, some of these women, also Yazidi women, they have committed suicide after raping, suicide out of despair. Yeah. So regretfully, there is not much, how to say, state or society intervention, institutional help in judicial area, and there's no justice for such people. And I think something has to change. And this is why I'm so grateful that this conference happened. It's an important conference because it can raise awareness about raped women and their children and the consequences of rape. And it can also bring fresh ideas and fresh approaches about how to integrate women and their children. They're human beings, yeah, how to integrate them successfully into the relevant society. And maybe one idea, which also I think was already mentioned, these children who are from raped women could even be in touch regionally. I think they are already, but even globally, because this population is very, very big, regretfully. Yeah. Thank you. Like to thank Deputy Bettina Vollath, a member of the European Parliament, everybody who participated in this conference. And I hope we can sometimes meet in person about this important issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Before we let you go, maybe allow me one more question. I guess I speak for everyone here because we discussed it also yesterday night. I mean, you did a very important first step, a diplomatic effort not to ban the denial of the genocide, which we know historically and psychologically speaking is the very first minimum step to face CBOW, to see them, to recognize them. Now, when you see here all these activists, people like Ajna who are affected, knowing your diplomatic background, what else would all these panel discussions here, what else should they do to be more heard from politicians, to close this gap by raising the voice and not being heard on the other hand? Then also considering the recent, the pandemic, the tensions in the region, but do you have one advice before you have to leave? What else could be done or needs to be done in order to be heard much more?
Well, we heard from Amra and Ajna, and we heard, and Ferida, we heard so many good ideas, and ideas which can be implemented, and I think with relatively little money. Yeah, if we consider and if we know how money is spent many times, how buildings are just bought by certain institutions, despite the fact that we have state property. We have sometimes empty buildings, you know, but money is spent for purposes where we don't know. And but we have many good ideas. I think if we would combine all these ideas, whether it's from Kosovo or from Bosnia and from other places, these steps and these ideas, maybe if we could put it into a law, would be very helpful for a further step. Of course, politicians will then have no excuse anymore, because if you have a draft law, then you have to deal with it. And of course, we know how it works. We have to do a lot of lobbying efforts, whether it is with international community, but especially with local politicians, you know. And there are victims everywhere. Even if there's one victim in one municipality, one nation, in others there are more, but all have the same problem. They're all victimized, you know, and they're all stigmatized. So it should be possible in this area, it should be possible to have a common law valid for everybody. This would be my advice. And if necessary, of course, I can use my now reduced influence to help to push such a law. I didn't mention, but we have also Baroness Arminka Delić. Baroness Arminka Delić from the House of Lords in London. I think is in close touch also with Angelina Jolie, and I think they have a common project also called Women in War, Women in Conflict. Yeah, so we have friends, you know, and even some old veterans, whether it is in former Yugoslavia or in Russia, they admit that this happened. And I didn't mention the figure earlier. Of course, there were hundreds of thousands of women raped in Poland and in Hungary and Germany, but 4,100 were even convicted soldiers, Soviet soldiers, which of course is ridiculous. But at least this 4,100, there is evidence there was something. And I'm sure there's also readiness everywhere to help you. And thank you also, Bettina Vollath, for this initiative. It's really fantastic. And to see so many young, energetic people, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Very encouraging words. Thank you. Amazing, actually. Okay, I'm not sure now how much time we have left. We counted in 15 minutes for open discussion after this first round, and then to move on to the other panel discussions. I'm afraid we don't have the time for it. Okay. Maybe there was one question I found really interesting before we move on, going back to Ajna. I think this one we should ask, we have to ask. Ajna, if you're ready for it, this one is for you. So can you share with us a bit in terms of your position as the president of the Association of the Forgotten Children of War, what kind of achievements have been made in the last years? And do you feel that the network is still growing?
Yeah. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we were able to write the first law on the legal recognition of the children born out of rape here in Bosnia. Also, I need to mention that our association has opened this topic of invisibility of the children born out of rape on the international level. We have spoken twice in the heart of the United Nations, mentioning the children of the peacekeepers as another category that deserve rights and dignity, and we cannot forget on the peacekeepers, baby, please. Also, in this moment in our engagement, we are currently members of the scientific board of the Stand, Speak, Rise Up Association. Behind us, we have several movies, exhibition with a clear presentation of this problem. We have several theater performances where we personally presented our stories on the stage of the theater. Through our activities, we have connected organizations from all over the world with the goal of jointly mapping and defining the needs of the problem we face as a children born out of rape. Also, we did in close collaboration with the other like-minded organizations and individuals in the region who are fighting for the realization of the rights of the survivors. Some of them are also here today, Feride and the others. So at this point, after everything that I said to you, at this point, I can say that we did everything. In this moment, there is no one in the world who has the right to say that we are hidden or invisible. We did everything to erase invisibility from our existence. And in this point, sorry, but in this point, I think that you are on the move as an international community. The international community and the national policies must act urgently and take care of the children born out of war, because we gave you our lives on the table, we gave you our stories, we gave you our pain, traumas, everything, and we are not more invisible, and that's the point. And in this moment, after this moment, we need to work together, because this is not just problem of Bosnia and Herzegovina, this is the problem of Kosovo and other countries who had a war behind them. So we did everything we could in these few years. I think that we can be very proud on ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for this insight. I would now say, in terms of the panel discussion, that everyone introduces him or herself quickly in like 1 minute, and then we start the open questions. So I would ask you, Sasha Magacinovic, to start.
Hello, everybody. Greetings from Sarajevo, and it's my pleasure to be together with all of you in this emotional event. I am a member of the parliament who is engaged on this issue together with Ajna. Ajna is symbol of dignity, self-respect, and bravery in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and it's my pleasure, real pleasure, to help in fighting for justice. I think that war criminals cannot be hidden forever, and I'm part of the mission not to have similar situation in the next period, but unfortunately situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina right now, it's not good, and many of the people are living in fear. If you give me just a moment to inform you about circumstances that we are living right now, Bosnia and Herzegovina is one step away of new escalation because of politicians who, among others, use hate speech. His name is Milorad Dodik, and he is a member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. He is the man who denied genocide in Srebrenica, attack religious identity of the citizens of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, insult journalists and political opponents. He is a man who blocked state institutions right now because of Mr. Insko, High Representative's decision to prohibit denial of genocide. Mr. Dodik is the person who brought the country to the edge of the war. And why is this happening? Because he was not stopped on a time. And because, above all, the international community in Bosnia and Herzegovina tolerate it, and even often chose him as a partner. And if we speak about possible conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I want to say that we don't have so much time to stop it. And people live in huge fear, vulnerable groups also. And that's the reason why I think that it's really important to speak right now about Forgotten Children of the War as an organization and the issue of children's born out of war. I think the role of this organization and this issue right now is very, very important as a lesson to all of us living in a Bosnia and Herzegovina, especially for those that are involved in decision-making process, politicians in a Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Parliament should be peace-building place, home of human rights in each and every country. Unfortunately, Bosnian Parliament, it's not. But we are trying to change a lot of things in our country, among others, that one that I talk about.
Thank you so much, Sasha, for this input. Sorry that I have to cut it down, but everyone 1 minute only, please. We would now move on to... Yeah, I know, it's super interesting. It's horrible that we don't have more time available, but we will have an open discussion. Vesna Telserlich, please, if you could introduce yourself quickly, 1 minute.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'll keep it short as we're running out of time for the discussion. My name is Vesna Telserlich. I am a survivor of sexual violence during the Kosovo War. I've been fighting for justice for a long time and trying to make a change in Kosovo and speak up for such a taboo subject. I would like to thank Ajna for her voice to raise this issue. I'm looking forward to the discussion and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. That was brief. And then we have Saranda Bogiovic. Saranda is not here, true, but we welcome Andreas Schieder, member of the European Parliament.
Yeah, hello. My name is Andreas Schieder. I'm a member of the European Parliament from Austria, and I'm in all my foreign policy life working on Balkans issue, so also in the European Parliament at the moment. As far as I understood, I should be brief in 1 minute because we then start with the statement. My only point is I have to leave at 5 o'clock sharply. So I don't know when you want me to say something more than 1 minute.
Maybe we would then do it now, no? Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
We give you the stage.
Yeah, because I wanted to jump in on the issue which was also said before by Sasha, which was the issue. What we are really concerned here is the development in Bosnia, the extremely cooking up of nationalist sediments, which is also destabilizing the whole country, and it is so. The other point where also nationalism is cooked up is on the Kosovo-Serbian border, where a dispute on nameplate car plates then finally ended up in even was very close to an armed conflict, which is showing that in the region for politicians it is more fruitful to work on national sediments and national feelings than to deliver, which I think would be more fruitful for the whole region, because delivering means fighting corruption, having a prosperity, economic growth, jobs, higher incomes, education facilities, and further steps in the EU accession. If I want, let me put it also in an additional broader perspective. The issue is also North Macedonia, on which I'm also working here in the Parliament, which is an example of a country which is at the moment undertaking a lot of reforms, but on the other side, of course, is facing upcooked, as I called it before, nationalist sediments from Bulgaria, which is at the moment blocking it for starting the negotiation, and it indirectly also blocking Albania, which I think is not good, because what we need in the region is positive examples where things are going up. And the very sad topic and reason for the activity, which I want to thank Bettina Vollath, especially, that she is organizing this, and also for her work in the Bosnia-Herzegovina group in the parliament, is what we definitely need is more positive examples, and to make to seek half. If a glass is only half, then we say that it's half full and not half empty, like it is very often seen. And I think the region has so much possibilities to understand each other, is such a positive thing to share, even complicated histories, even more than other ones. So I think the European Union is an example where it worked, and probably the Balkans should also work. But I'm afraid that some politicians are not capable on this on the Balkans. And I also want to say that I'm also not satisfied with, for example, the European Commissioner, because I think he must be also more active on the field, where also I think Mr. Schmidt must be now, which is the follow-up of Mr. Insko, must be even stronger protesting on what's going on in Bosnia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Strong words. Indeed, very tricky right now to think positive with the recent tensions, considering that the most neglected population of Chibo, I guess, will again be not a priority anymore for some time. However, we move on to the next discussion. Katarina. Right, yeah, Katarina Krohoncha.
Yeah, Katarina Krufonja.
Perfect. Krohonja.
Yes. Good evening. So I'm sorry. First of all, I'm very grateful for these words, insights, and opportunity to listen today about this deliberating and healing power of empathy in action, how it transforms an invisible, forgotten, oppressed, ashamed into courageous solidarity, dialogical, and creative action. Thank you very much, all of you. So I'm coming from Center for Peace, Nonviolence, and Human Rights from Osijek, Croatia, and we have a long-run experience of working on post-war peace building and on the processes of dealing with the past. It seems to me that we will not have a time, much more time here. So I would like just to share an information on this event, that in preparation for this very event and thinking on follow-up, we have now an opportunity, and Center for Peace with the support of British Embassy and Austrian Embassy, actually, we are organizing the starting and regional, or the first event towards regional campaign of children born of war. So we will have an event on 9th and 10th of December around the International Day of Human Rights in Osijek. And we would like to invite people interested in regional campaign. So we will have one and a half day to talk about thinking how to build coalition or a kind of forum, or what can be the next step in the region to connect people to work together. And I will share with you on the chat contact that you can contact us if you are interested in that. Thank you. Is that okay? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Very important, amazing. And we are coming to our last but not least speaker, Vesna Telserlich.
Hello, everyone. Very grateful to be here with you, to be with ones whom I am seeing first time, or being with others whom I know for 10, 20, or even 30 years. Because this is a struggle in which we will make steps. We might even win sometime. I know it was special to listen to you. But the crucial question now is how to keep inspiring and strengthening each other. When I see between the participants Nela Pamukovic or Lepa Mlađenović, who have been part of first SOS telephones for women victims of violence, or Mariana Senjak, building Medica Zenica, directly offering help, or when I see that here is Adriana Hanušić with groundbreaking contribution with the special request to UN Committee Against Torture, which finally ruled in August 2019 that Bosnia and Herzegovina should publicly apologize and pay compensation to victims of wartime rape. I just know that what is needed is really to keep campaigning. And I also recall how empowered I felt in session of Women's Court in Sarajevo in May 2015. So I hope that in this discussion and the discussion in Osijek and some other discussions will be very concrete and will help to each other to have more theater performances like Darrel's and other theater performances, because Ajna and colleagues and Vasfije and other survivors made whatever you can and was possible to be done to eventually tell the stories. But these stories are presented to very inert public. I hope that tonight we are not inert. Tonight we are very alert and very curious and want to help. But we need to work together actually to overcome the stigma which is still there. I just want to tell you one more thing. In estimation of number of rape survivors in Croatia, we have spoken about 3,000 persons, women, children, and men who have been raped. Today, just a bit more than 200 have applied for legal compensation. In Bosnia and Herzegovina, estimations are between 20,000 and 50,000. And it's only more than 800 which applied for support. In Kosovo, 20,000. And numbers of applications are still under 1,000. So I'm telling you these numbers to be aware how big is the difference between estimated number of persons who actually survived rape and the ones who actually come forward, and how big is our task and how big is our advocacy responsibility. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for all your amazing words. Thank you, Vesna. I would just quickly to remind all of us about the amazing bridge which has been done from starting with the research, talking now about Amra and me, for example, with the CBOW network and all other researchers here on the panel, transforming this research to work in the field on the ground in an artistic way, which is why we are all here today with Darrel Toulon, where we reached out to a completely different population than only the research world, having represented Ajna as well. I think this is all most important steps to encourage more and more people, to make it more and more public, and to open the conversation to all kind of people about CBOW so that they are not any longer neglected. What is now new and most important in this panel is that we have representatives here from Bosnia, Croatia, and Kosovo, and I would like to highlight a bit again all these regions. For our understanding so far, I think Bosnia did a lot with children born of war. We don't know enough about Kosovo and Croatia, so I would invite now the Kosovo representatives here to speak more about how they perceive CBOWs in their country are seen, non-seen, and what could be done as a next step. Maybe Feride could speak, or Vasvit, whoever. Yeah, Feride.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sophia. As I mentioned earlier, in our society, there is still a big taboo about children born of rape. Indeed, also for survivors of sexual violence, we had to fight more than 15 years in order to be recognized by law. While we was advocating for recognition of survivors of sexual violence, we mentioned also children. But there was no willingness or the platform that we could really add also children born of rape in the current law, which is treating other war category as well. Due to taboo that exists in our society, discrimination, I think also the survivors of sexual violence who are coming in our organization are still living in fear to openly mention that some of them might have some children in a family. Right now, what we are doing, we have a regional project which we are trying to document rape victims in from a moment when incident happened till the consequence they are suffering. And 3 of the survivors, while they was bringing some family members, they mentioned that they have children born out of rape, which was very hard for them, but also for us as an organization, because what we could do in this stage, we can provide psychosocial support to them as organization, but there are no still space, or the society is still not open and prepared to open such a tragic issues. And for me, it was very important really to see what is happening in Bosnia and Herzegovina, what is happening in Croatia, just to learn and see also with the performance in the name of the Father, just to see how we can prepare the ground, how we can prepare the society, the community of survivors and family, just first to open this kind of wall of taboo. And then we could see how we can lobby and advocate for law revision, because there is nothing in terms of policies and laws, but also there is a lack of willingness also of institution. There are no mechanism in place for such an issue. So we are quite in a situation that we don't have nothing on place. There is a law which is treating survivors, which is giving some beneficial to the survivor, which is fine. We have around 1,000 survivors who already are recognized by the state. But in terms of treating children born out of rape, I think we would like to learn and to bring practices who already work in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and perhaps in Croatia. I saw that there is a law, but in terms if there are children who are benefiting, I don't know. So we would like to learn from a region and to bring the best practice, as well as to avoid the challenges that already organization and are facing in Bosnia.
Thank you so much, Feride. Very fruitful insights. I would move on to Croatia as well, but before I might use the chance and maybe pose a question to Andreas Schieder again, in terms of what support could Parliament, the government, do to help prepare the ground a bit better to close this gap. Okay. Anyone else who would like to respond to this question? Any other MP? Maybe Sasha? Yeah.
I want to say once again, thank you to High Representative Mr. Inzko for introducing this decision. I think it's a very, very good one for the Bosnia and Herzegovina, for our society, but also for the region. We need to be aware of the genocide in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and denying of genocide is something that belongs to this civilization. That is good example how international community need to act in this region. Questions like what will say somebody who is promoting war criminals does not have to be something that we talk about. We don't care what they think about it. And Mr. Inzko was brave enough at the end of his mandate to help us in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but in the region also, and we will be aware of that fact in the next period.
Okay, sorry, Amra. Yeah, you wanted to say something here.
Yes, and I wanted just to share a bit of experience with Farida Rushiti. When we established the association yesterday, it was actually 6 years ago, but at the beginning we had problem even with registration. In Bosnia, you have to register associations through the state Ministry of Justice, and then we had problem, with categories that we mentioned as members. We had problem even with the name, and there was a 6 months of negotiation with the ministry, and they asked us to change the name, and then we didn't accept it, so we negotiated, and then we established it. It took 6 months to officially register the association. And when I decided to establish association, I did it with 2 boys born out of forced marriage, and several of my friends who were human rights activists. And I just wanted to have a platform where when I'm doing research, I can say to my study participants that there is association that they can join, that they know that they are not all alone in the world, as many of them used to say. So, and based on our experience on helping in establishing Women's Survivors Association, we found that Survivors Association that is run by survivors are really empowering. They really show to be very powerful, and they actually contributed to breaking the silence. They contributed to empowerment and to their recovery. So I remember Ajna, I met her for my 50th birthday, my round birthday, and it was 4 years ago, and she was very skeptical, and now I'm so happy to see her. She was very, very skeptical, and she even rejected me at the first time, like she needs time to think, saying that she was fed up with this organization, who are kind of some of organizations, some survivors feel that some organizations use them for their projects and donations. So there was mistrust and rejection at the beginning, but then Ajna took some time and she decided to join the association because I saw her, knowing that she is a psychologist, and talking to her for the first time, I really just seen her, like standing. Our vision is actually came true much faster than we could imagine, that she would be once the leader, in the international leader on the topic of children born of war. So, and the topic was very sensitive in Bosnia, And in 2016, we actually translated a book from German into Bosnian on the German occupation children. And that was our kind of breaking the silence on this topic and introducing this category to our people, to our public. And then that's how we started with the book promotion in Sarajevo, a huge media coverage. And I agree with the colleague from Croatia that, you know, in Bosnia, you said it's over 700 women that registered. It's not, it's as far as I know, currently over 1700s, but that is nothing compared to the estimates of 20 to 50,000. So we work, Mariana Senyak knows, she worked at the beginning and we pushed this legislation, and I'm happy to learn that Adriana Hanušić is also here, because I think that, you know, when the law was adopted that regulate the status of women victims, that was the turning point that more women start to talk about it and to get recognition of their status. I think this is the same apply for children born of war, that we have to work hard on the legislation and on the campaigns in the future. Thank you.
So much, Amra. I see some hands up, but I would, because we are so limited in time, I would now invite again Vasvie to say a bit more, because we are all very interested in knowing about the Cueva Foundation, which works with sexual survivors. And the question we had yesterday actually was, is there already any effort, any work with children born of rape? Could you brief us a bit?
Yes, like Ms. Schieder mentioned, there is not enough information regarding kids out of rape in Kosovo. As far as we know, there's 3 cases, but because of stigma and such a taboo to speak about children out of rape in Kosovo, the mother hesitates to tell the truth if the child is born out of rape. So far, we only have 3 cases that me and Farida are aware of. We have to work to change the minds of the society when it comes to the survivors as well as children born out of rape. So maybe they can come forward, but I think it's going to take quite a bit of time in Kosovo to make those changes for children to be able, and now they are adults, for the adults to be able to speak up and say they're product of rape. We'll do whatever it takes with Farida's organization and with the government to make changes and give them a free space and open door for them to speak up. As part of the Cueva Foundation, yes. Go ahead.
Would you say, like, thinking now again about our artistic approach here with Darrel, that a movie like In the Name of the Father is helping in this regard?
We spoke with Darrel when he was at Farida's organization, and yes, such a thing would probably open the minds of people to come forward, but I think it still takes time for Kosovo. We're not there yet. I think it will do more harm than good at this point.
Too early. Yeah. One question, Marijana, you are having a question.
I'm having a comment. I hope that you hear me. You hear me? Yeah. Okay, great. I just would like to add some information about the situation in Croatia related to children born of war rape. In the first assembly of Committee for Establishing the Status in Croatia in 2006, among 137 requirements, there were 2 requirements for so-called extended monetary compensation. It means 2 women gave birth to children born out of rape. So what was a situation, and I guess the similar situation is in other countries, it was a lack of documentation. And in Croatia, according to law on administrative proceedings, state bodies are obliged to submit existing documentation on their archives from previous years. So it was the line to research. And just short comment about all our discussion. So inspiring role model of Ajna Jusić and the organization Forgotten Children of War from Bosnia and Herzegovina could be experience what we could follow in our countries and in regional campaign. And also what our previous experience show that we could approach communities by strengthening role of art. And Grbavica movie in 2006 helped a lot on recognition of status of war rape survivors in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And when we look at from psychological point of view, really rational, smart talks do not come to the hearts of people, and cathartic role of art, these emotions, what we all have, mobilize that. Aim of any campaign is to mobilize us in action. So we are mobilized through emotions. And I think that all what we talk about regional campaign could be a part of our further steps and our further common work, especially knowing all what you mentioned in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo. Similar situation is in Croatia. Now we have 2065 completed files and registered survivors of war rape who achieved their rights. But still, from 2015, when law was adopted, it was like of public presentation of the law. And I guess still here is my colleague Nela Pamukovic from Center for War Victims. At the end, like in the war, a center organized radio campaign, informations through radio, because survivors are now in their 60s and they listen radio. And then we got in Center for Women War Victims 10 survivors who never applied to the institution.
I'm so sorry, Marijana.
Yeah. So
I need to interrupt you at this point.
We could continue together in our region and worldwide.
Very important point. We are only afraid that the panel might just stop at 5, and it's already 5. We have some words from Her Royal Highness, the Grand Duchess of Luxembourg, which we would now like to play so you can all listen to her. And then we would have final words from the organizers, Bettina, Vollath, and Darrel Toulon. And in case something happens technically, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, dearest Ajna and Mrs. Vollath, for inviting me to this panel. Thank you to everyone here for hosting and organizing this discussion on the cause of children born of wartime rape, which is too often silenced. Let's not forget, behind every child born of wartime rape, there is first and foremost a mother and a child who are innocent victims. Because of their birth conditions alone, these children have no legal existence, no status, no rights. They are deprived of care, schooling, prospects, and everything a child needs to develop, yet they are not considered victims. Like their mothers, these children are victims of war and terror. They deserve justice, recognition, and reparation. To achieve this, they also need a voice and a platform to express themselves if they wish to do so. We need to listen to what they have to say. Nothing on them without them. Therefore, I am very happy to be with you today to share knowledge on best practices, on how to transform their experience, their pain, their feelings, into something constructive and positive. We need to take action, and we need to share these practices on regional, national, and international level. The international community must address the problem of these children as a matter of urgency. We at Stand, Speak, Rise Up with the survivors try to play an active role in this mission. The international community must provide survivors and children with specific care within the framework of international humanitarian law. It is now up to us to ensure that the children born of rape are not left behind. Wartime rape cannot destroy entire generations of women and children. I want to congratulate my dear sisters and friends for their extraordinary strength and their initiatives. And I call upon all of you to help us end sexual violence in conflict and support those who suffer to this day the double penalty. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I give now the word quickly to Darrel.
I would like to thank everybody for being here today, for contributing, giving everything that they have done. And of course, we need much more time to talk about all of this. And for this, I would like to thank Katarina Kuhonia and the Peace Center in Austria for organizing the follow-on event, which I would invite everybody who would like to contribute questions, comments, and throw it into the chat. All of the thoughts that we did not have a chance to process today will be processed in this OSIEC event in December. I would like to again specifically point out that if it wasn't for the courage, the incredible courage of the Bosnian children born of war to follow me with the strange idea of going on stage and telling their stories, or they told their stories without being able to go on stage, but we had the stories, and because of the stories, because you trusted, because you took the chance, it was possible to hear one headmaster say at the end to one of his ex-students, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." It was possible to hear one grandmother say, "Tonight I will go home and sleep." And I would like to share this with it's a message sent by some random citizen of Bosnia that came to me after the second performance in Tuzla as my closing word. She says, "Children who were born as a product of raping during the war were strange to me. I considered them as individuals that are somewhere out there in the world, far, far away. Now I do realize that these are right here, right now, around me." I found the play educating, very honest, and is talking directly and openly about the real problem. It makes us question the prejudices we have, how much tolerance we have inside our souls, and we are humans at all. My message to you on this World Day of Tolerance. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Darrel, for being with us. Bettina, maybe you would like to speak some final words to conclude.
Yes, thank you, Sophie. And I thank everybody who contributed today, either by active contribution or by taking the time to listen to this important topic. To conclude, I think we need two essential things to change the situation for the good. First, it's genuine empathy for all the people affected by this painful topic. And second, it is the powerful will to rise out of this pain to come to a real reconciliation. And for this reason, I would like to sincerely thank Ajna Jusić again, who follows these goals as a real bridge builder. Ajna, thank you for sharing your story and thank you for speaking to us. And be sure, we all know the work has to go on. So I deeply hope that this issue will continue to be discussed in a broader scale by the public, which will then urge politicians to act. And maybe this can even help to develop a strong peace initiative and reconciliation in the Western Balkans. I would really hope for that. Thank you all.
Okay, these were very interesting and important final words. So I thank everyone who took their time to be with us. I hope you all enjoyed it. I think we had very fruitful insights. It's a bit sad that we were talking before how much we would like to discuss, but as usual, the time is never enough. We will send out the brochure with some more background information of all the participants so you can get easily in touch. And surely there will be a follow-up event, and whoever is on the newsletter right now will be informed whenever we have some more information. But I think the most important is that this conversation keeps going. Thank you so much, everyone. I just see Darrel has a last note. 1 second, bear with me. December Osijek. We have already dates? You have dates?
Yes, the 9th and 10th.
The 9th and 10th. So we will provide you with information. Thank you so much. In the name of CBOW, have a good, nice rest of the day. Bye-bye.